fisheries and marine resources is still very much a way of life for St. Lucians. It is a tradition which has roots reaching back to our very survival as a people and nation, and has now become fully entrenched in our culture. Today it has moved from simply being a cultural tradition to being considered as a profitable business opportunity by many of our resourceful nationals. It is becoming an art form, with vibrant young people thinking up innovative ways of invigorating and presenting some of the traditional practices which today capture the irresistible stories of our past, while at the same time demonstrating how we can profitably move into the future through sustainable new methods of fisheries. By marrying knowledge and understanding of the sector, while simultaneously bringing new technology to bear, the government of St. Lucia is eyeing the future, where a new culture in fisheries may emerge. Recognizing the importance of the fisheries sector and its potential to increase its contributions to employment, personal income, and the country's overall GDP, the government has embarked on a mission to develop, manage, regulate, and responsibly conserve fisheries and marine resources. The vision of the National Fisheries Policy is to develop an ecologically healthy, economically viable, socially inclusive fisheries sector, as well as to provide food and nutrition security to the country in a sustainable manner.
Fisheries governance covers a wide range of matters, but mainly refers to how you do things. And the Department of Fisheries has reached a breakthrough in terms of adopting an ecosystem approach to fisheries management. And when we say ecosystem, we recognize people at the center of that ecosystem. So it's not only the environment, the resources, but the human resources, the human capital is very critical. And in fisheries governance, what we try to do is to work with people to help improve the ecosystem so that we can benefit from it.
In terms of fisheries governance, we understand that as a cooperative, we have a role to play as an organization that represents fishers, but we also understand that we are only a part of it because there are unaffiliated fishers who are not necessarily part of the cooperative, and there are the other entities such as the Department of Fisheries, the Ministry of Agriculture, and so on, who together provide a unified front, so to speak, in order to deal with the issues that face the sector. And so that is why for us consultation is a very important aspect of the development of the sector and the industry.
Part of governance does entail interfacing with the people and agencies that are tasked with ensuring decisions are taken and followed through.
So the Department of Fisheries role is two-pronged. The first aspect we do is work on resource management. So our role in fisheries management is to first understand what the status of the resource is. Whatever you're extracting, we must have a better understanding of how much to extract, when you should be extracting, what type of methods, etc., so that you're doing it sustainably.
One of the roles we play as a cooperative is to ensure that as information is filtered down from the Department of Cooperatives, that we filter it down to our members and the fishers as well, to ensure that in terms of best practice and so on, that these things are adhered to. So we've not developed anything specific to us as a cooperative, but we try our utmost to adhere to the national regulations, for example, open and close seasons and so on. We ensure that we filter that information down to the fishers so that there is a level of adherence.
Sustainable fisheries management is very critical because if you don't manage what is being taken out and how often it's being taken out, you can result in a fisheries sector that crashes within a few years. So we must work with regional agencies, with international agencies, because we share resources with other countries to come up with the best management plans for the various fisheries. And these management plans are anchored on or centered around the status of the resource itself.
The move for more improved collaboration does trickle down to farmer organizations themselves and the people who lead them. To better govern the sector, government supporting agencies, fisherfolk cooperatives, and allied institutions must move to align themselves with revised accountability, integrity, and transparency guidelines.
So in terms of collaboration within the other fishermen's cooperatives, we as the managers, we have a managers forum. When we began a couple years ago, we met on a monthly basis. That has since become more fun in between. But what we aim to do at these sessions is to discuss and to find best ways to deal with issues. What we've realized is the issues of one fisherman's cooperative tends to be the same issue in other fishermen's cooperatives. So usually we are able to get an opportunity to discuss these issues and to benchmark from some of the cooperatives who are perhaps a little more advanced in particular areas. So over the past couple of years, for example, we've seen all of the cooperatives move from manual accounting to automated accounting, and it was something we did as a grouping. In terms of internal operational matters, we have been able to share best practice amongst ourselves. Further to that, we have the umbrella organization, which is Saint Lucia Fisherfolk Cooperative Society, and within that grouping that is made up of the board of that organization is actually board members of the individual primary societies, and so they too get an opportunity to share information and determine the way forward for the cooperatives collectively rather than individually.
Saint Lucia's National Fisheries Policy will guide the planning and development of the fisheries sector for the period 2020 to 2030. The policy includes the vision, priorities, and strategies to guide operational decision-making in a manner that supports the sustainability of fisheries resources and contributes to the social and economic development of Saint Lucia. When one considers what value there is in the unique richness of our marine biodiversity, he realizes that policies must be enacted to protect it. The marine environment, along with the fisheries sector, are crucial components of Saint Lucia's economy and cultural heritage, as it affords stable livelihoods, as well as the well-being in many coastal communities. The island's ecosystems include a broad spectrum of tropical marine and coastal habitats, including coral reefs, mangroves, and the wide open ocean. Saint Lucia's fisheries sector consists of marine commercial and recreational capture fisheries, aquaculture, and post-harvest activities. Additionally, recreational interests such as scuba diving and deep-sea fishing are also regulated under Saint Lucia Fisheries regulations. How these economic realities coexist and are able to thrive alongside each other is of critical consideration to the overall fisheries economy.
The policy in itself is actually going to be the first for Saint Lucia having a policy for the fisheries sector. Normally what we had done in the past was prepare management plans for a particular fishery which was focused on the resource. It was highly focused on creating, for example, reference points, determining maximum sustainable yield. So very science-based work to look at the resource itself. But what we're shifting towards, because we realize governance is about people, it's about people's livelihoods, it's about people making a profit. People don't go into business not to make money. So we want to create an environment where we're not only looking at the resource, the fish, but we're looking at more than that, and we're bringing in more stakeholders. So we're looking at issues of social issues, we're looking at issues of market, we're looking at issues of sanitation. So we're bringing in more of the cross-cutting issues that any sector would face and trying to deal with it so that we create an environment that fishers can improve their livelihoods, and we see development beyond only technology, but through the fisher, through the sales, etc. So more holistically, and that's what we're hoping to achieve with the policy. So the policy has different priorities, and each of them are supposed to be building blocks towards an improved sector. The other aspect is, of course, as I said, it was people-centered. So fish by itself is a fish by itself. It's not a fishery, but it becomes a fishery when someone extracts it, someone benefits from it, and as such, that person is very critical in the process, because we're not managing the fish, we're really managing how people's behaviors, what people do. We're trying to inform them, guide them, so that they make the best choices and decisions with regards to sustainable livelihoods. The fisherfolk organization forms a very critical role in terms of advocacy for the fishers. So they play a role in terms of ensuring that the fisherfolk can work with the Department of Fisheries, and they bridge that gap there, and we work together as best as possible to try to ensure that the fishers are represented in all aspects of what the department is doing, because at the end of the day, as I said, it is the fisher that is going to be benefiting, and it is their activities that must be managed. So more can be done, especially when it comes to the issue of sanitation. There is a critical need for education, training of fisher folk, so that they are able to improve the standard of what they're doing. But I'm even cautious and mindful to indicate that very often what we do is driven by market demand.
That is the agenda of the Saint Lucia government, to continue collaborating with regional fisheries partners such as the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, CRFM, the Caribbean Network of Fisherfolk Organizations, the CNFO, and the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute, CANARI, to initiate projects in Saint Lucia which address key areas of concern for the sector. One such project is the Stewardfish Project, which emphasizes networking among fisheries and marine stakeholders, which in effect places much more responsibility on industry partners to educate and empower themselves on sustainable use of these resources.
The Stewardfish Project is very timely for, one, the Department of Fisheries, two, the fisherfolk organizations on the island. In a grander scale of things, Saint Lucia, we have benefited from a number of activities under the the Stewardfish Project. A few I can make mention of: the communication strategy with communication products, raising the awareness of the Fisheries Act, the Fisheries Policy. We've had 2 successful consultations on the development of a national fisheries code for fisheries.
Some of the successes documented thus far under the Stewardfish Project are documenting who exactly at this time are the fisherfolk leaders and board members in Saint Lucia, the activation of cleanup activities at landing sites around the island, and raising the awareness of the ecosystem's approach to fisheries.
We've seen the fishers become more involved in marine ecosystem stewardship. They've been reporting, I've seen this, they've caught turtles in their net, they've released it because they know the importance, with all of the public awareness that have been done under this project and other projects we have at the department.
The National Fisheries Policy reflects the mutually agreed stakeholder priorities related to sustaining fisheries resources and enhancing benefits derived from the fishery. However, it is the combined national efforts in these areas, as well as improvements in Saint Lucia's climate change and disaster resilience, advancements in social development, and enhancing the role of stakeholders in decision-making and institutional strengthening that will work to ensure sustainable livelihoods for food and nutrition security. The vision for the fisheries sector in Saint Lucia reflects the prominence placed on sustainability and profitability, the combined importance of the production and ancillary subsectors, and shared responsibilities in stabilizing sustainable livelihoods for food and nutrition security. To this end, much effort has been deployed through policy enactment to augment the performance of each fisheries subsector. However, interventions start with the resources at hand, capitalizing on what's available and spreading out activities and interventions to educate fisherfolk on careful use of our valuable marine and fisheries reserves.
When you look at maximum sustainable yield, it looks at what can you extract, how much can you extract, and on that basis, you formulate your fisheries sector. Because if you can only extract 2,000 tons for the year sustainably, that means that's what you have to capitalize on, and that's what you have to begin your value chain. The other aspect is maximum economic yield, which is how many people can comfortably engage in the sector and earn a reasonable living based on that 2,000 tons. And these are the two questions. Sometimes it's hard questions to ask, but these are very critical questions to ask ourselves and to develop a sector on these two bases. The fisheries sector is highly dependent, or livelihoods are highly dependent on the resource. That's the foundation of it. If anything happens and it results in destruction of reefs, or you don't see the migration of fish anymore, that's it. There's nothing out there. The sector, that's it. And so, at least for the wild caught fishery, I mean, that's not speaking of aquaculture. I mean, aquaculture you grow, and so you can have that supply, and once you have lands, and you can produce. But when you're looking at wild capture fisheries, you must maintain that. So it's very clear that that's the foundation of what you're doing. And based on that foundation, you can see where you can possibly go.
The sector's contribution to food security lies squarely on bolstering fisheries livelihoods. For the Department of Fisheries, its concern lie on preserving the integrity of our unique ocean offerings while simultaneously taking advantage of these distinctive features. There is scope for Saint Lucia to capitalize on niche industries if practical, keen eyes are kept open.
We can look at opportunities like aquaculture, mariculture, growing fish to help support or augment that development. We can look at technology to help support coral reef enhancement, to help improve what the supply would be. You can look at opportunities to grow different species, etc. But these are the initiatives that would help increase the amount of socioeconomic benefit that can happen through the sector. But we must recognize that when you're dealing with a resource that can be finite, if you don't manage it properly, it can cause a full collapse of a fishery.
It is against this backdrop that fisheries leaders have pushed the idea of aquaculture in Saint Lucia. The thinking is that by diversifying the sector, the island would realize an increase in employment opportunities in rural communities. Achieving this feat would pave the way for fishers to make a greater contribution to food security. Over the last decade, aquaculture farmers have received much technical support and advice from the Department of Fisheries in setting up their ponds and even businesses. And while initiatives for capacity building and training within the subsector are ongoing, it's apparent that more dialogue and intervention is required in setting market pricing, increasing market access, and enabling sustainable financing for fisheries livelihood development.
The challenges we face is the markets. Most times we have to hustle and find our own markets, like the hotels, you know, and even sometimes we hustle local restaurants and stuff. I'm getting support to an extent. In terms of stocking my ponds, getting the young ones to put in there, I get it from fisheries. I don't have a problem with that. But the markets, most times, you know, you're on your farm and you're hustling, and then you still have to go out there and find markets. It takes a toll on your business because you spend more time out there when you need to spend that time on your business.
Future growth in aquaculture will be supported within the broader context of sustainability, which includes environmental, social, and economic components. Support for the sector is provided through a wide range of measures, which include improving fisheries infrastructure, fishing vessels, fishing gear, and improving fishing methods, promoting self-sufficiency through increased marine and aquaculture production, advancing the social and economic status of fishers and their families, duty-free concessions for fisherfolk, boat owners and processors, covering all important fishing equipment and materials, and a fuel rebate for registered fishers. The government of Saint Lucia went a step further to restructure the Saint Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation. Lucian Blue Ocean Seafood is strategically positioned to help raise the bar in marketing and resale of fish. The idea is to continue growing the entity to offer more to fisherfolk, the sector and the entire population by catering to the island's social, economic and cultural needs. This is a tactical move to ensure longevity in the sector and to demonstrate that fisherfolk livelihoods can be more than just simply canoe fishing.
With the state of where things were, we are still behind on a lot of things in terms of where the company sees itself in the future. There's a lot of work still to be done. Equipment needs to be purchased so we can get that company, Lucian Blue Ocean, to an international standard. And it's one of the things that we've been working tirelessly to achieve, is to achieve HACCP certification. And that in itself is extremely difficult. Infrastructure-wise, we have to get all these stuff sorted, get things in place for, so accountability is there from every aspect of the process of catching fish to the processing and subsequent retailing of the product. And of course, Lucian Blue Ocean is not just, our goal is not just to be a regional or a local company, but to be a regional and international supplier of Lucian products, of Lucian seafood. It's imperative for us to partner with the local fishers and for the local fishers to understand where it is that we're coming from. And we've had pushbacks, it's understandable. People are always skeptical to new entities and new things and change, but we've been plowing away steadily at trying to, I wouldn't say necessarily win them over, but to get them to understand where it is that we're coming from. That this privatization, this PPP, isn't against them, it's for them, it's for the betterment of the fishing sector.
The journey to secure sustainable livelihoods for food security is a complex one. It takes collaboration, determination, constant dialogue and action. And while most decisions have been taken among leaders in the past, emphasis now is being made to include the constituents that these policies will impact as part of the dialogue.
What we find as a fisherman's cooperative and representatives of the fishers is that there is I don't want to say lack of, but we feel that communication and so on and collaboration can be vastly improved. The fishers still do feel very underappreciated. They do still feel that they are just not part of the decision-making process, especially for things that affect them directly. So what we find is a lot of the time we get to know things after they've run their course, basically, and we want to be more involved as the fisher cooperatives, as the fishers. We want to be more involved in the decision-making process. The truth is that over the years, it has improved somewhat. And again, I think it's because we constantly agitate and we constantly ask and plead and speak out of turn sometimes because we want to be heard. We think that there is a lot of knowledge that lies within the cooperatives, within the fishers themselves, that can lend themselves to policy direction and policy making.
The guarantee of a buoyant fisheries economy is contingent on interventions such as the CRFM Model Disaster Management Plan, which serves to safeguard the sector from disaster risks and other hazards. One of the many defense lines used by the Saint Lucia fishing sector is the prioritization of mainstreaming climate change adaptation into all aspects of fisheries governance through ecosystem approaches and institutional arrangements such as the national intersectoral coordination mechanisms. All these are calculated moves to build resilience and sustainable fisheries livelihoods for food security. Increasingly, social and cultural considerations influence fisheries policy and the day-to-day management and decision-making. The perceived importance of diverse social outcomes as well as potential contradictions between different fisheries and jurisdictions are often weakly defined in fisheries policy, giving managers a lot of leeway in developing management plans. When promoting social and cultural considerations, fisheries leaders have to take into account many aspects, including the much smaller and more fragmented nature of the fisheries social science community, largely caused by resource fragility, the low level of interest and consistency of fishers, and population pressure, which ultimately affects the market expansion and technological change.
The tradition will never go away. Even the newer guys who come in will have to rely on some sort of tradition. It's sort of passed on through generation. It's in our DNA. If your grandfather or your father grew up on a boat fishing, at some point it's in your DNA. You might end up being a lawyer, but you still might want to go and catch a fish every now. It's in your DNA. But the technology is so important right now. The technology has gone so far. I'm aware of companies that can tell where a fish was caught, by whom, when, right down to the piece of fillet in a supermarket. So they can tell you by that fillet who caught that fish, when, where, and how. The international standards requires us to at least up our technology to a certain degree that enables us to compete with the international market.
Fisheries leaders now believe there is a lack of true understanding of how the characters, context, and relationships within the fisheries and marine industry and related communities interplay, realizing now that critical social inquiry and ongoing assessments as to how culture and tradition affect modernization efforts within the sector is important. One thing is certain: the manner in which fisheries and marine resources are utilized and managed reflects Saint Lucia's socio-cultural values associated with the sea.
I think there has to be a little bit more education into a lot of stuff that is happening internationally, standards-wise. I think there really is a need for these education or training programs, like whatever they may be, to educate the fisher folks as to new practices and new procedures. But that is not to say that the fisher folks are not extremely intelligent people. They are very knowledgeable for the resources that they've been having to deal with over the years. I mean, initially when I had my first conversation with some of the fishers, they were talking about HACCP certification, and oh, you guys gonna go this way, you're gonna go that way, so do we have to ice our fish so you can take it at a certain quality. So they are aware, but what I think is lacking is the further push to get these standards.
However, are we able as a country to develop the sector in such a way that traditional fisheries can still operate alongside modern fisheries infrastructure seen internationally? For fisherfolk, their concerns and needs seem simple and straightforward. They want to be heard and included in decision making. They want their trade to be respected, as it is an art form and truly defines them as Saint Lucians. And they want to be certain that they can continue providing for their families. For fisheries leaders, it's about slowly augmenting the tried and true fishing and management practices to make them relevant in this modern age. and relevance in the sector speaks to the methods and practices which enhance fisher safety and that which will build on sustainability and profitability for fisheries and marine livelihoods.
Wire meshes, that's what we used to build the pots. You know, the mesh used to be smaller. And when fisheries came with year by year, you know, they come in different laws. They're making the mesh wider. You'll find about 80% fishermen will coral, but never coral. But I need for my safety. Because I always say, we're supposed to catch what we can use, what that have value. I believe in values. So what we don't need today, it can stay for a couple of months, years, and then we can get it. So we'll catch it, so we'll always have fish here around.
What I would like is for us as farmers to have a stable market and for the pricing of the seamoss to be reasonable, especially for us as farmers, women, mothers. We need a price that is profitable for us so that we can get along and make ends meet.
Some of us believe anything that is here, it belongs to the cooperative. And who is the cooperative? We are the cooperative members that make the cooperative, you know. So it's us, we ourselves fishermen have, you know, step up and do what we have to do and to protect whatever ways we can protect, to protect the place.
Many contributing barriers have been recognized for the current state of the fisheries sector. Certainly, the many fisherfolk who opt to operate on the fringes of formal arrangements, such as the Fisherfolk Cooperative, is one hurdle that restricts authorities in filling in the voids to strategically position the industry for the future. The desire of the Department of Fisheries is to enable a culture of competitiveness and an environment which is conducive for export and investments.
The fishing industry has not evolved much because we've not brought in a lot of young persons or new persons rather, and the reason is because the sector is not seen as, the trade is not seen as sexy enough. And so the question is, how do you do that? And of course we highlighted one of the things is the recognition. But what we found, I guess, because of an offshoot of that is a lot of persons who come into the sector is not because they really have a passion for it, it's because it's seen as a lender of last resort. So a young man drops out of school, for example, and he hangs out by the bay, and the next thing you know, he's now on a vessel, and then the next thing you know, he's captaining the vessel. And so that is one of the things that lacks in terms of the formality of the sector. And we've often agitated for captain licensing, for example, to be tied into a vessel license or to be tied into a fishing rebate or something of that sort, so that it becomes mandatory for people to do that sort of course being provided before they can become a captain of a vessel. And so one of the things we're seeing is that although in some cases there are regulations, but there is not enforcement of the regulation.
No change is ever possible without effective dialogue, and to achieve the reform desired within the sector, bringing it on par with international standards and practices, and to encourage that cultural shift in terms of local perception and understanding of where the industry can go in the future, a robust national public education and awareness campaign must be initiated.
It is very dangerous. Some of the practices, some of the cultural practices that are in the fishing industry that are still going on. If we don't address these things, there could be an outbreak of some sort of stomach bug, some stomach disease. Nobody knows where it's from until years down the road it's discovered that, oh well, you know, it's from fish being left out or seafood being left out extensively. And I think these guys can do it. The guys can adapt to certain standards.
Generally, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of communication and to reach people. It's an ongoing process. It's not a start and stop. It has to be integrated into everything that we do, and sometimes it's unfortunately sometimes not the first thing we start with. So that's where we're trying to make that shift, that we're starting with the education, with the communication, with the, engaging people, find out what's engaged.
Active participation and consultation to raise the level of inclusiveness in decision making, and education for fisherfolk and those charged with the responsibility of overseeing the modernization of the sector are other pivotal installments in addressing the socio-cultural concerns of the sector.
I think we've had this conversation over and over in terms of how do we sell it. For example, you have career fairs and job fairs, but where is the Department of Fisheries and the fisher cooperatives in these job fairs? So how do we tell the school leaver that this is a career option for you? And so that is lacking. We've had the discussion so often in terms of the cooperative side of things. There is no educational program where we go into the schools, for example, and sell the cooperative sector or sell the fishing sector. And I think going forward, these are one of the things that we probably should look to implementing so that we can sell it like any other job, any other career.
That was my vision, to see everybody who have pushed back to this whole privatization, this PPP, embrace what it is, and for the company to explode, but not explode alone, but bringing everybody who's involved in the fishing sector, from the fishers to the cooperative to the Ministry of Agriculture, together to create this industry, a dynamic industry.
Because we realize governance is about people, it's about people's livelihoods, it's about people making a profit. People don't go into business not to make money. So we want to create an environment where we're not only looking at the resource, the fish, but we're looking at more than that, and we're bringing in more stakeholders. So we're looking at issues of social issues, we're looking at issues of market, we're looking at issues of sanitation. So we're bringing in more of the cross-cutting issues that any sector would face and trying to deal with it so that we create an environment that, fishers can improve.
Saint Lucia is at the juncture where all our gears for development must be activated and move in sync with one another, adjusting its sails to the winds of change. The fisheries and marine industry is well poised within the national economy to provide an avenue for stabilizing the island's gross domestic product through entrepreneurship and niche markets, job creation, and sustainable food and nutrition security. By developing the national policy for the fisheries sector, the Department of Fisheries and by extension the government of Saint Lucia has thrown out a challenge for every stakeholder and user of our marine resources to be champions, stewards of our ecosystem, ambassadors for transformative change and revolution within the sector, captains of sustainable local fisheries livelihoods, rich in socio-cultural appropriateness. The national policy for the fisheries sector is the passport for a modernized fisheries economy.